I have some notes here that I'm going to go over. So I'd like to talk about the mind and learning. I am trying to understand how to even begin to use the mind, use thinking, and learn, starting with language, for example, and writing. So if I write a sentence that gives a certain effect, like I will break through, that's a feeling that I have, meaning that myself will somehow break free or transcend its current state to a different place or state or understanding. Hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of general, but okay. So I will break through. I. So I'm breaking down that sentence. I will break through. I, that's me, the self. Will means the future. So this is a future oriented action or sentence. Break is kind of like a violent action. Break. You break something, I was thinking breaking through, as in there's a boundary and I'm breaking through the boundary. So through is the movement. So there's me, there's something that's limiting me, then there's an action or movement, and one way or the other, I get to the other side or to the other side of that thing and I'm in a new place. That's the general conceptual model of a breakthrough, an awakening, an epiphany, an understanding, an insight, anything that allows us to unlearn, learn something new, and grow, change. Um, so, in looking at this, I was thinking about physics, about how do I conceptualize breaking through. I got some drawings here for just as examples. Okay, as examples. The self being the little circle, and the larger circle being the boundary or the area you're currently in and breaking through. So in that one case, we're moving in a direction and maybe breaking the barrier or just going through the barrier. The second case here, which is example 2, we are expanding through the barrier rather than moving our location. So we are moving, it's just we're staying at our central point and expanding through it. And at that point, we then are larger than the barrier itself. We've essentially encompassed or encircled or digested or swallowed that. So that's just 2 ways, and there's many other ways of thinking about the self. And I'm drawing these in 2 dimensions. It's a 2-dimensional drawing, and I'm just a little circle, and my environment is another bigger circle. So does that kind of drawing and conceptualizing in 2D, does that even help at all to understand the thinking process that I am having? Those kinds of drawings are, well, what we do in math and in science and chemistry, biology and physics and medicine. When we're taking notes, when we're learning body parts or learning velocity curves and anything, it's 2-dimensional drawings. And they're good enough so that our mind can conceptualize it in 3D. And most of the things that we're studying oftentimes are in 3D. Like, how do you shoot a rocket to the moon? Or how do you do open heart surgery? These are all in 3 dimensions. This is what we're dealing with. So now, as I'm thinking about this, though, as the concept of breaking through, I might not be dealing with just 3 dimensions. So first of all, how do we draw or teach ourselves multidimensionality? I'm aware that in math and in physics, they do have theories of different numbers of dimensions. Maybe there are computer programs and models that try to simulate what it would look like 4th, 5, 6, 7, 11 dimensions. But we're still viewing it on a 2-dimensional screen and imagining in 3D. So how do we get our mind to see, or can we get our mind to see more than 2 or 3 dimensions? So our eyes, I think, and I'm not sure, but if you close one eye, you're basically just seeing 2 dimensions. You don't have your depth perception. Basically, it's just a screen, like watching a movie. When you have 2 eyes, you can see 3 dimensions because they can triangulate the depth of something. So you can kind of map it out in 3D space. So if you want to see in 4 dimensions, for example, I guess the fourth dimension sometimes is considered to be time, but regardless, would you need a third eye? So, in other words, to see in 2D, you need one eye. To see in 3D, you need two eyes. To see in 4D, you need three eyes. Okay, maybe that's the way it works. I don't know. But then what about if you want to see in 5 dimensions or infinite dimensions? We're not going to be doing that with our external eyes. If anything, there would be internal eyes that would allow us to see, quote unquote, and to think in ways that are beyond our visual perceptive field. Okay, so that was a lot. And I don't even know if that was anything or just a bunch of blather. But I'm trying to learn how to think. And in doing so, I'm making drawings on a piece of paper. I feel like that's very helpful. And looking at the fact that, first of all, these drawings that I was drawing, for example, these drawings right here, represent things. Okay. Represent phenomena. So in one sense, the drawing is a meaning or a symbol that gives us the idea of what thing we're trying to talk about in the drawing. Okay, that's what a drawing is in one sense. But then I'm looking at the drawing itself, irrepresentative of anything. You might call that art or abstract art, but essentially just the drawing is a drawing regardless of what it represents. It's like that piece of art. It's like this is a pipe or the pipe is not a pipe, whatever. And then I'm looking at the act of drawing itself. What are we learning from the act of drawing the circle, the act of drawing this line and thinking that it means something? I think there's something to that as well. I don't know if there's a terminology for this, but there's the representation and then there's also the action. I think they're both important. So it's not just simply we're not just perceiving shapes and saying, oh, this is a meaning and a symbol, but in the act of creating the symbol, you're also acting something out. So I don't want to lose that part of it. Now it gets a little bit more complicated for me. Because I flip to the next page in the notebook and I'm thinking to myself, how to even remember what I wrote on the last page. Never mind if I've got book, chapter, page after page after page of more and more complicated thoughts. I think this is kind of what philosophers might do or might have done in the day. They're writing these compendium and tomes of philosophy, right? Which probably requires a lot of going back and forth and thinking and writing and thinking and writing until the whole theory becomes more crystallized in the mind. And, I don't think philosophers are writing 100 different books. They maybe make a couple of them. It's probably very difficult to do that. But this is not something that we've really been trained in these days. How do I string together longer, more coherent thoughts? Because as I think about education now, we go to school, learn all the basics, go to maybe higher education, and there's big textbooks. A lot of it is just memorizing and practicing over and over again. But is the way that we learn in school nowadays too complex? Through that process of reading textbooks, listening to lectures and all that, is it too complex to allow us to pave new roads in our mind, not ones that have already been done before? Because I'm looking for very out of the box theoretical and conceptual understandings that are not in, let's say, the main branch of science, for example, of physics, because I could be wrong, but I think that if you're educated within physics, for example, and you kind of branch off into whatever, thermodynamics, optics, nuclear physics, quantum mechanics, electricity and magnetism, and so on and so forth, everything's building up upon the knowledge of the basic, Isaac Newton and all this stuff. But it's all growing in this one tree. What if there was a big tree over here or another tree over here that had a major theory of physics, in the way that geniuses like Einstein are like, nope, we're planting a whole new tree. Now there's this whole new theory. So it feels like that hasn't been happening in a long time. Maybe this is, I don't want to say that I'm being naive here, because I get that all of physics is a balance between theory and then experimentation, and those things kind of reinforce each other. So we've gotten to a point where we've built up a lot of theoretical knowledge that's also reinforced by experimental results that many, many people have confirmed. So gravity is gravity, for example. But I would like to question whether that is really, truly the only foundation for this existence. Now, metaphysically speaking, okay, we find ourselves here as human beings in a very specific way. We all have a head, 2 eyes, hands and fingers. We all fall down due to gravity. Everything works really specifically. Animals evolve, plants evolve over millions of years due to these particular conditions, the genetic codes and the environmental conditions, which everything is so limited in a very specific way. Imagine showing up on an alien planet where nothing looked or functioned in any way that we could comprehend. How do you explain that, right? If the laws of physics apply everywhere in the universe, it should more or less be familiar. We would be able to correlate our current experience to that new experience on some random alien planet. But I'm questioning whether or not there are entirely different ways of conceiving existence than the standard one that we currently hold. Rather than just building up off of the only tree that we know, maybe there's a whole forest of other trees with other laws of gravity, other laws of electrodynamics, where I'm trying to think about how to think in other dimensions, how to think truly outside the box, so that I can use my brain in a completely different way. And I get this is maybe a wild goose chase, but because we're born, right? We're born without really a whole lot of understanding. But there is the epigenetics and the cultural reinforcement, so that it's pretty soon when we get here, again, because, okay. What I'm trying to say here is, what if there are other ways of conceiving of this life, this human life, this earth-based life? We grew, supposedly, theoretically, from basically stardust to unicellular organisms to ultimately these complex biological creatures / machines. So all of the learning has been based off of step by step, thousands of years after thousands of years. So you would think it's really what it is, quote, ontology. This is what it is. Yeah, we don't really know why it's this way, but it is. We don't know why humans don't appear as 20-dimensional purple triangular dodecahedron prisms, with green laser beams coming out of every direction. We don't know why, but we just appear this way with like the fingers and, everything. But what if there are all these other ways that we can appear or that we do appear, but we're actually not aware of it because reasons? And I don't know what the reasons would be. So that's kind of where I'm trying to go here, is is there a possibility of unhabituating the mind so much so that everything I know tells me that the answer to this is no, and yet still kind of interesting to explore the what if. Is this always going to be a mouse? Is this always going to be my thumb? Like that. Is there any other way that this thumb can be? or not. It's a very puzzling, kind of vexing question, I think. Um, can I do this and then flowers bloom? Is that possible? Surely, certainly it's possible. Possible, not likely, but it must be possible. I have a hard time believing that there's only one way that the universe can present itself in any given situation, aka total determinism. Um, Especially if science is trying to tell us that there are quantum clouds of possibility or probability that tend in certain directions, but also can have off chances of going in very different directions. How do we know? We have direct experience. Every time I look at myself, I see the two brown eyes. I don't see 100 eyes in a circle. I don't see that right now. But look at visionary art. Fractals of many, many faces, for example. Turn my head, there's another face here. Turn my head, there's another one here. There's another one behind me. And then on top of that, there's another one, another one, another one, and another one. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Visionary art. Buddhist, some iconography, perhaps, like maybe this is symbolic or who knows, but Kuan Yin, Bodhisattva of compassion, sometimes has 100 arms or 1,000 arms, hands, to do all the things, to help everybody. But what if it's more than metaphorical or symbolic? What if there are ways in which a human can have 1,000 arms, literally? Not literally, but literally. Actually, literally. Trying to figure out how to think outside the box. So all that being said, connecting that to the mind and thinking and writing, to try to form these questions or these ideas in ways that can be mapped and explored in the way that my question then becomes, let's say all the neural pathways that I've gone down and maybe I'm kind of used to and stuck going down the same ones. What if I want to just kind of pull back my energy or just kind of go back to zero and then let it form in a new way, for example? I think psychedelics, hallucinogenic, and things like that is one way that the mind's normal pathways can be completely changed. And that is something that is being currently shown and proven through various types of MRI studies and fMRI studies. And my question is more how to get back to the basics about thinking in and of itself. Back when people were figuring things out, like what are lines? What is a triangle? And figuring it out in the act of drawing this and seeing it and matching it to things in the world, but then deeply understanding the relationship between these. You know, you can draw a triangle, but it's not a square. You could draw a triangle, but it's not a circle. But you can't draw a four-dimensional triangle in a certain way. Why not? Why can't? Can you or can't you is my question. Can you draw a five-dimensional shape or being? I want to know. I'm not going to settle for. I'm too interested and curious to settle for this three-dimensional simulation, which is very much reality. Don't get me wrong. Very much reality, but there could also be more to it than this, guys. And that's what we're gonna find out if we live to see another day, which hopefully we will. And maybe I'll be able to start writing more and drawing more and having some kind of understanding go through in my brain. Now, it's funny because I feel very stupid, very dull, very ignorant, like I can't put two and two together. And yeah, I know that I'm not stupid because I can talk about this, but there's a certain level of dumb where I can't really connect the dots. Does that make sense? So there's a little bit of a almost a humiliate, not a humiliation, um, not even an embarrassment, but a self-conscious awareness of the limitations that I face in trying to convey or understand something in a way that is not translating through this body and the current apparatus that I've got working for me. So surely, as the Dalai Lama says, the universe is contained in a single atom, which means everything can be contained in this in one dot. So theoretically, infinite understanding should be somehow available and accessible, which is very encouraging. Anyways, guys, it's been a while since I made a video, and things have been, I don't want to say things have been difficult, but there are reasons. But I'm trying. Once in a while, I might show back up on the channel and make more videos, and we'll just keep going. Onward. All right. Well, from till next time. All righty. Bye. Where's the button?